Okay, now let's take a look at white blood cells. White blood cells are also known as leukocytes. Leuko means white, cyte means cell, so white cells. All right, these are cells that fight infections. So these are defensive cells. So looking at this picture here, you can see a bunch of red blood cells. These are platelets here. These are white blood cells. Now I know on this picture they don't look white, but we've stained them so that we can see them. Otherwise, they're pretty hard to see. All right, so these are showing the 5 different kinds of white blood cells. We go to this next picture, it shows these a little bit more. So looking at types of white blood cells. The first group are called granulocytes. And these are leukocytes with a granular cytoplasm. So this one here, and this one here, those are all granulocytes. So they're about twice the size of a red blood cell, but they have typically short lifespans. So, looking at about, half a day to a day. It's all they live for. So the first one is this one here. These are neutrophils. Neutrophils are phagocytic cells. They're going to phagocytize bacteria, fungi, and some viruses. All right? They're typically first to an infection, and that's because they're the most common white blood cell that we have in our body. Next are eosinophils. This is an eosinophil right there. Eosinophils are going to moderate inflammation, and they're also going to defend against parasitic worm infections. Next are basophils. So this is a basophil right here. These are white blood cells that release histamine and heparin. Now, histamine causes inflammation, and heparin is an anticoagulant. It inhibits blood clotting. And so what that does is it increases blood flow to these damaged areas. So you can get, so histamine actually draws, neutrophils to the area, and you get a lot of blood flow, so you get more white blood cells to a damaged area. So eosinophils and basophils, very low percentages of the cells, white blood cells that we have in our body. Next are agranulocytes. So this one here and this one here are agranulocytes. So they do not have a granular cytoplasm. And so the first one here are monocytes. So monocytes are white blood cells that phagocytize bacteria, dead cells, and debris. So you can think of them, they're another group that are phagocytic. Okay, so remember phagocytosis, that's where you engulf another cell or large particle. These are our largest white blood cells. All right, we call these guys macrophages if they get outside of our circulatory system, outside of the blood. Next are lymphocytes. These are lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are our immune cells. They are going to attack specific pathogens. The rest of these guys are all generalists. We get any type of pathogen in us, they're going to attack them. We're going to make lymphocytes specific to a particular pathogen. So if you get, West Nile virus, you're going to make lymphocytes specific to West Nile. They're not going to help you against Ebola. You're going to have to make new white blood cells all over to Ebola. And if you're getting West Nile and Ebola, I would move somewhere else. All right? So, 2 types of lymphocytes. One are T lymphocytes, also known as T cells. These are white blood cells that are going to directly attack microorganisms, tumor cells, and transplanted cells. So, once again, if you get like a parasitic worm in you, these guys are going to attack any parasitic worm, but you're going to make T lymphocytes specific to that pathogen. It's not going to help you against other types of parasitic worms. All right. Next are B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes, also known as B cells. These are white blood cells that produce antibodies. And an antibody is a protein that attacks foreign cells or proteins. We'll talk more about antibodies a little bit later on this chapter and into another chapter. Now let's look at white blood cell counts. I don't think I have a picture of this, but our typical white blood cell count in our body is anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 white blood cells per millimeter cubed of blood. So let's look at, if it gets too high or if it gets too low. One type is called leukocytosis. And this is where the white blood cell count is above normal. So it's above 10,000 cells per millimeter cubed of blood. All right, so this typically indicates an infection. So, if you have an infection you're fighting off, well, you're going to make more white blood cells. So that's why your white blood cell count would be above normal. It can also indicate leukemia because those cancerous blood cells are going to look like white blood cells underneath the microscope. On the low end, that's called leukopenia. This is where our white blood cell count is below normal. So here, the total number of white blood cell counts is below 5,000 cells per millimeter cubed of blood. And this can indicate a type of disease. So measles and AIDS are a couple of indications, a couple of things that could cause leukopenia. And that's because the measles virus and HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, both those viruses attack and kill our white blood cells. All right, so let's move on to platelets. So platelets are also known as thrombocytes. So these guys right here. These are cytoplasmic fragments found in blood that function in coagulation or blood clotting. All right, and as the name implies, you can see these are essentially pieces of cytoplasm off of a larger cell. And that larger cell is called a megakaryocyte. So megakaryocytes are found in our red bone marrow, and they're going to literally release pieces of their cytoplasm, and that's what becomes a platelet. These last about 10 days in our body and are removed, and we can have anywhere from 130,000 to 360,000 platelets per millimeter cubed of blood. And that's kind of the Goldilocks area. If we get below 130, well, our blood, we're going to bleed too easy. If we get above 360,000, then our blood clots too easily, right? Which can also have bad effects.